When it comes to memoir, one of your challenges is having your reader feel like they actually know your characters, that they're able to visualize them. But then the tricky issue of race comes in. Can you mention a character's race in a book? Does that help a reader actually visualize the character? And how do you do it so it's not offensive? The answers to these questions coming up. So I know this is a really controversial topic. So why am I doing a video on this? Because I need more hate mail. So I think it's a really important topic. And if you don't agree with the points I'm making, feel free to leave a comment below the video. But before you do, please understand that this video is coming from a place of love and my heart really is in the right place. Just one tiny disclaimer here. I am not claiming to be an expert on racism. I am claiming to be an expert on writing. I'm a Random House author and the creator of Memoir Writing for Geniuses. Okay, let's get into this. So why would you mention a character's race in a book? Aren't we not supposed to see color? So yes, you need to be able to describe your characters so that your reader can visualize them. So let me start with the kinds of descriptions you probably don't want to include in your book. He was a Black man. She had Asian features. The woman in front of me was Latina. The problem with a description like the ones I just gave you is that you are limiting that character to just their race. You're not giving me any other information about them, which means that you feel like telling me their race is all I need to know. So it's a little bit problematic. So this leads me to tip number 1. If you're going to describe a character, don't only describe their race. You want to tell us other things about them as well. So in general, these minor characters, we don't need this long description of them. Sometimes it's more effective to just include a detail or two. So if this is a minor character in your book, instead of describing their race, I might do something like this. He was wearing thick glasses. She had obviously gotten a bad perm. She lightly stepped from foot to foot as she handed me my bills, almost as if she were hearing a song in her head. So I don't really need to completely visualize a cashier or bank teller. So just any description, any one little physical description is usually enough. So that leads me to tip number 2, pick a characteristic other than race to describe characters that only appear in your book 1 or 2 times. Do I really need to know that the cashier who rang you up was Latino or that your bank teller was Asian? It doesn't have any impact on your story. I would actually leave it out. So in order to keep from bringing up race, a lot of writers try to be coy. They try to get around it while hinting at their character's race. So they might do something like this. His dark skin gleamed in the night. She smiled at me with almond-shaped eyes. The man was wearing a turban. So I don't think these examples are much better. In fact, they kind of annoy me. To me, this is like you're doing everything possible to let a reader know a character's race without coming out and saying it. And it just feels disingenuous to me. So which leads me to tip number 3, don't try and use these poetic descriptions as code for describing race. So thus far, I've talked about characters that really aren't that important to your book, and therefore it doesn't really matter what race they are. Now, there are going to be characters that are genuinely important to your story, that are going to appear time and time again, that are going to be a huge part of your plot. And sometimes in order for us to feel like we truly know these characters, it is important for us to understand their cultural background. So the problem with talking about a character's race stems from the fact that if I see an Asian woman walking down the street, I really can't make any assumptions about her. However, it's not true if I know where she's from. If I know that she escaped North Korea and now lives in San Francisco, that is information that can actually give me a little bit of insight into who she is. So that leads me to my next tip. Talk about nationality instead of race. So race actually tells me very little about a character, but nationality actually can tell me a lot about how a character sees the world. So let me give you some examples. This is what not to do. The first man to approach me was a tall Latina. What's wrong with that sentence? Well, it's shortcut writing. It goes back to my earlier examples. You're assuming that being Latino is all I need to know about this character. This is just one way I might rewrite that sentence. The first man to approach me was surprisingly good looking. Later, I would learn he'd been born in Mexico, but had come to the United States when he was 3 years old. I'm giving you a little bit of his background of his history. I didn't use the word Latino or Hispanic. I used the word Mexican because that's his nationality, not his race. Well, someone from Mexico has a very different upbringing than someone from Argentina. So I honestly feel that nationality tells you things about a character that race just simply can't do. So here's the no-no. Here's the version you don't want to include in your book. I was greeted by a short Asian woman. Just knowing that this character is Asian doesn't tell me really anything about this character. How would I fix this? So this is my rewrite. The woman in front of me had an accent, but I couldn't quite place it. Where are you from? I asked. Vietnam, she replied. Okay, super basic dialogue. But there I'm getting that information across without coming and saying, I'm looking at an Asian woman, right? Which some people will take offense at. So here's the before, and then I'll give you the after. Here's what not to do. A Middle Eastern looking boy crossed the street. So how would I change that? So I would do something like this. He was a small boy who seemed nervous as he crossed the street. His mother called out to him in what sounded like Arabic. So there I've given you some cultural context. I'm not judging this person by the way he looks. So that's tip number 4 for you. Talk about nationality instead of race. Okay, that brings me to my next question. What if you were describing someone who identifies as an American? I have had many friends whose parents were from other countries, but they were born in the United States. And so someone would ask them, where are you from? And they would say, Nebraska. And the person would say, yeah, but where are you really from? Which is a really insulting question when someone is born in the United States and identifies as an American. So in this case, the idea of using nationality doesn't really help you out here because you're talking about an American. Well, one thing you can do is talk about their family history. So as an example, his parents had emigrated from Guatemala to start over, leaving the dense, humid jungle for the cornfields of Iowa. So there we're talking a little bit about his family background, not his race, and not where he's from, which would be the United States. Let me just give you another example. He had dark, straight hair and cinnamon-colored skin, traits passed down through the generations from his Aztec ancestors. So does this sound like the coy examples I gave you earlier that I said not to imitate? Let me explain what the difference is with this one. In this case, I'm actually not trying to disguise his race. I use the word Aztec ancestors. What would be the coy version of this? The man was wearing a sombrero. Right? That's kind of like playing with your reader and winking at them, which I just don't like. So tip number 4 is to tell us their family history. Okay, this leads me to my final question. What if you don't know what country they're from? What if you have no idea where their parents came from, where their grandparents came from? So tip number 5, if knowing a character's race is important, then give us the context. So if it's really important for your reader to understand their race, then give us the context, justify this. Let me give you some examples. So instead of saying the family was Asian, I might do something like this. In an all-white neighborhood, being the only Asian family was a liability. So here, it really is important to understand what race they are because of the context. Let me give you another example. This is what not to do. He was a tall Black kid. So let me give you the after version, the improved version. He stood out because of the color of his skin. He was the only Black kid to ever play on the Beaverhead County High School varsity hockey team. So their race is really relevant. It's relevant to the story you want to tell. So my last tip for you is if you're going to bring up a character's race, it needs to be relevant to the story you want to tell. Give us the context that makes bringing up race relevant to your story. If you would like a free class on how to structure your memoir, there is a link right below this video. Also, any likes or subscribes this week come with an extra free 15 karma bonus points. Get lots of great writing done. See you next time. Bye, guys.